Suppose you are a prince on the run, hunted, wanted, and the only person who can save your life and your title to kingship is the same person who turned her back and abandoned you and everyone else years and years ago. What would you do? Would you go to her for assistance? Paivepo. A long time ago in a faraway land, at the funeral of the king, Zingai, all but 25 reigns old, decided to get rid of the past-filled angry pimple in his heart and address the issue that had gnawed at his heart and his soul for over 7 years. So he stood, and without waiting for the chief customary leader who was giving funeral rites to give him the go-ahead to speak before the crowd of the gathered Zero people, he walked to the front of the podium, and clearing his throat, he waited for the crowd's attention to turn to him. And indeed, the crowd had stopped fidgeting and whispering and turned to stare at this irregular interruption that stood before them. And in that moment, Zingai was grateful that no one else in the royal family had told him when he stood before the crowd. They are probably thinking that it's the grief of losing my uncle, he thought to himself, and that I am about to give him a spectacular eulogy before the people. Little do they know, he chuckled inwardly. When he was satisfied that all the crowd's attention was on him, Zingai cleared his throat one more time and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you all for coming to lay the Prince Regent to rest." He paused a bit and watched as the mild interest in people's faces turned to mild confusion. So quickly, hoping that he would have enough time to say what was on his mind before he was whisked away, he continued, "I say Prince Regent because the man we bury today is and was never the right king. Instead, my father was the firstborn king of the last true king of Zero. Yet because of extenuating circumstances, he was cheated of his throne by the now deceased king. My people, my father could not fight. You all know how sickly he was, so he let the throne go. But he made me promise that I would fight for what was rightfully mine, which is this throne. It is unfortunate that when I was 18 reigns old, I told the now deceased king that I knew that the throne was mine, and he sent me to the military, to the hardest and fiercest battles, promising me that if I proved my worth as a fighter, then indeed I could become king. But whenever I returned from one battle or the next, he would tell me that I would need strength to become king, and that when I returned when I turned 25 reigns, then I could become king. When I came back last moon, after having turned 25 reigns, the king was ill and bedridden, and he told me we would discuss it once he got better, but he never did. Then he passed. People of Zero, Zingai stopped, for from the peripheries of his mind, he could already see the hustling of his cousin brother as the man rose. So he reached for the golden chain that sat in his pocket, and he took it out and held it up, dangling the locket of the Zero crest that lay there. This is my proof to kingship. As you know that the rightful king has to pass it to their son who is next in line in the kingdom, I am the holder of the crest, and if anyone here does challenge what I have said, then I challenge them to show the Zero crest. But by the time he had finished speaking, Pepukai, the cousin brother who was thought to be the new upcoming king, was thundering towards him, shouting, "Liar! He is a liar! Do not listen to him! He is just the son of one of my grandfather's many bastards! He is a nobody! Do not listen to him! Guards!" he finished, roaring. Yet Zingai could see where Pepukai's eyes were, right at the crest Zingai was dangling in the air. So Zingai ran, created space between the two of them, and shouted at the guards who were charging towards him, "If any one of you dares to come close to me, then know that I, as the rightful king, will have you arrested by nightfall. You will all sleep in the dungeons tonight. Try it." But Pepukai was thundering closer, his face fraught with tension, calling out, "Capture him!" Yet the guards stood, not knowing which person to listen to. The crowd sat too, looking in awe at this unexpected turn of events. The king had not been buried yet here his son and his nephew were fighting for the crown. It was the kind of news that they thrived on, the kind of news that they would tell their children and their grandchildren, saying, "I was there when it happened." "If you say I am an imposter," Zengai shouted as he stood opposite Pepukai, guards barricading them from each other. "If you say I am an imposter, prove it. Show your crest. Show the crest that your father, who is lying in that coffin there, left for you." Pepukai opened his mouth to respond, but even before he spoke, Zingai's sixth sense, which had been honed by 7 reigns of fighting wars in foreign lands, told him he was in danger. He did not know where the danger was coming from, but he knew he had to protect himself, as he had always done, so he quickly leapt to the side, then ducked, curled himself into a ball, and had an arrow whoosh past his head. He had no time to find out who had released it, and even lesser time to reach for his own weapons to launch a counter-attack. He knew he had to protect himself. He knew he had to run. If they somehow managed to maim him or to injure him, then they would simply get the crest for themselves, and Pepukai would find a way to execute him for treason. So Zingai fled, running haphazardly in a zigzag foam and straight into the crowd, knowing that if he tried to flee away from the crowd, he would be an easy target. Once he was in the midst of the stunned crowd, he stopped, pulled out his assegai, and aimed it straight at Pepukai's head. He did not wait to see where it landed, but ran, quickly leaving the marketplace and straight into the forest. Once he got into the density of the trees, he ran for a long time, trying to put as much distance between him and Zero as he could. He had no idea where he went. All he wanted to do was to flee the shame of his past, the shame of being unwanted, unvalued. That whole afternoon and well into the night, he walked, he jogged, he sprinted, without any inkling of where he was going, but still careful enough to stay as far away from communities as he could. He did not want news of his whereabouts reaching Pepukai. He tried as hard as he could not to listen to the voice in his conscience that told him of where he had to go, that told him that there was a place that was surfaced for him, that told him to seek the answers his father had never got. But night fell, and he retreated into a small cave, and then the icy wind of night blew through it, and he was too scared of starting a fire alone, and in those moments he knew. He knew he had to go east. He knew he had to find her, if not for shelter, for protection, then also for answers, and for help too, for Head Baba told him over and over again, she is the only person that has the answers that will help you reclaim the throne. And by morning, he was certain he was going to the sacred place that everyone talked of with reverence, fear, and a touch of mystery. The place he had seen his father gone to, but never come out alive. The place his grandfather and his uncle, the recently departed king, had called a curse, a blight on the land that had to be obliterated, be razed to the ground, for the people that lived there were witches, wizards, soothsayers, bad doers, banishes, people who had been let go from their societies and who had decided to create a witch's den in the forest. When his father had told him of her story, he had been certain she was still alive. Countless efforts were made to destroy the evil grove, his father told him. They sent 1,000 warriors. They sent the best healers and spellcasters of this land, all to destroy the grove. But the enchantments placed upon it were very strong, and nothing they did made it crumble. Eventually, they had to make a concession with the healers there, that they would leave our kingdom alone, and in turn, the people of Zero promised never to attack the grove. So I am sure she is still there, still alive. So that morning he walked east, stopping to pick fruit and sit and wonder if he was doing the right thing or if he ought to go back and claim his throne. But he knew that laying his stake in zero would be impossible, undoable. Nobody in their right mind would support a supposed king who had fled. He had to build his case and prove it. So east he walked until he found the great Vase River and began following it, as he knew that in that place it forked into 3 tributaries. There he would find the grove nested. He got to the tributaries on the 3rd evening, and a part of him wondered if he could try his luck now, or if he had to wait for the morning. He dithered as he stood by the banks of the river, looking up at the beautiful hearts nested atop what seemed like an extra large anthill, thinking. Then he made a decision he would regret forever. He chose to go in the morning. At dawn, he waded into the icy cold river, wanting to wake up his tired body. He had stripped and left all his clothes and weapons by the bank, although he had worn the crest dangling from a gold chain on his neck. For a long moment, he allowed himself to close his eyes and feel the water pierce every part of his soul, of his body, and allow it to forget everything that had happened in the last few days, and concentrate his mind on the task at hand. He had not even decided on the approach he would use when he entered the grove, angry warrior seeking revenge, or humble gentleman wanting answers, when he heard something. Footsteps in the vicinity. Quickly, he opened his eyes and saw 2 men framed against the redness of dawn, standing by his clothes and weapons, aiming their bows and arrows at him. He gasped. It was Pepukai and a guard. Instinct told him to swim towards the enemy, but the moment the water moved, they released their arrows. Warrior that he was, he dug, of course, but he had never fought in the waters before, and he knew immediately that he was at a disadvantage. He ignored their chuckles and began to swim towards the riverbank with the same haphazardness he had shown at the funeral, confusing their aims, ignoring the voice that was screaming inside him that he should swim and run away again. The warrior in him, the folly in him told him otherwise, that he had fought battles with greater odds against him, and he had won. And before he knew it, he was by the bank, again haphazarding as he ran towards them. He knew that it would be difficult for them to shoot once he was closer, but it would be easy for him to fight, even the both of them. All he had to do was grab a weapon from either and use it on them. Yet he had underestimated the power of the god Pepukai he had brought, and the man had a rage that sat in his red eyes that showed he was thirsty for an annihilation. But Zingai was not deterred. The 7 years on foreign warrior missions had made him tough, and he fought them 1 against 2. He anticipated Pepukai's cowardly parries that came from behind him, and effectively defended himself against the god. And yet the god did not tire, fighting with his assegai against Zingai's bare hands, not once flinching or moving his feet from where he stood, making Zingai act like a demented dancer before a warrior. And as it grew lighter, Zingai began to tire, both in energy and in spirit, and a part of him wondered what would happen if he gave up. But that moment he let his guard down gave Pepukai a chance, and Zingai felt, from behind him, a blade pierce his abdomen. He would never remember where he got the adrenaline, for he had seen the god's eyes light up with victory, but he had quickly managed to bend down, pick his clothes, disappear into the forest, zigzagging, and ignoring the cackle behind him that called out, "You are now meat. Go wherever you want. We will catch up with you soon." It was full light when he came to, and he was looking up at the most beautiful young woman he had ever seen, a creature with large eyes and large hair, and a softness in her posture. All he had managed to do was say, "Please help me, save me," before he drifted off, and things blanked out of his mind again. He remembered now, drifting in and out in her heart. He remembered too the verses that flashed between him as they helped him, but the verse that he could not get out of his mind was that of the girl with the large hair. All he wanted to do was see her again. And then finally, days later, he had opened his eyes fully, and the first thing he had seen had been his crest, the zero kingship crest, dangling down an old woman's neck, and for a moment he had been taken aback, thinking that she had perhaps stolen it, but he had patted his chest and found the crest still there. Then realization dawned, and he knew it was her, the woman he had been looking for, his grandmother, and sitting right beside her, the beautiful girl with the large hair. He knew instinctively where he was, the healer's grove. The old woman, who during the course of the day he had learnt had changed her name to Makoni, kept asking him who he was. Why do you have the crest? What are you here for? Did anyone send you? A myriad of questions he refused to answer, at least not now when he was weak and in pain, and he could feel himself drifting in and out of consciousness. He was just happy that Makoni had allowed the big-haired girl to stay, to tend to his wounds, and he was grateful for her presence, not because she was beautiful and easy to look at, but because he shuddered to think what Makoni would do to him should it just be the two of them in the heart. He knew what she had done to his father, the man who had come to the healer's grove on his feet, looking for a cure for his never-ending illness, but who had returned a week later, carried on funeral scaffolds, his body cold and ready for the dark, unforgiving earth. No, there was no way that he, Tsingai, was going to have a conversation with her, Makoni, until he was in a good state. The crest had been enough to pique her interest over who he was, and until he was strong, he would tell her the whole story. One morning, he awoke to the gentle ministrations of the big-haired girl as she patted the sweat off his body with her wet cloth. For a long moment, he watched her under hooded eyelids, mesmerized by her beauty. He could not help but wonder what her story was and what had brought her here. Yet also he could feel the gentle stirring in his heart, a flutter of excitement he had never felt for a woman before, and he tried to dismiss it, but to no avail. He knew that he had a mission that he had to complete first, before he could even look at a woman. He had to take control of his land, of the crown that had been stolen from his father first. Women were just distractions, and even more so, pretty young women with large eyes and large hair living in a grove, far away from the real world. So he cleared his throat and watched as startled. She jumped up and went to stand a distance away. Then she laughed quietly and said, I am sorry. I didn't realize you had woken up. I am happy you are awake, and I hope you stay that way for some time. You saved my life, Tsingai said. You could have left me to die by the riverbank, but you saved my life. Thank you. I pray to the Mecca that one day I will be able to reciprocate your kindness. But first, I need to know your name. Yemurai, she said, and he ignored the way her voice ran over the room like the calmness after a torrid storm. She moved closer and asked as she came to kneel before him, Is there any place you feel a lot of pain, or do you think I can help you sit up so you don't get sores from lying on your side the whole time? He allowed her to help him sit up and ate from the plate of porridge that she gave him. How long have I been out here, Murai? He asked. About a week and a half, she said. He nodded. That's a long while. And in his mind, he was thinking that Pepukai's coronation had already happened by then, as there would not have been any challenges to the throne, and that would complicate matters, fighting a king for kingship, when all he could have done was challenge a crown. But that was no deterrent, he thought to himself, because... But his train of thought was interrupted by some shuffly footsteps by the door, then the scraping of the door as it opened, and then the old woman entered, and immediately Zingai's eyes were drawn to the crest that dangled from your chest, and a blind rage overtook him, threatened to topple him back to the land of the unconscious he had inhabited in the last few days. He calmly set his plate aside and watched as she came to sit by the fireside, opposite him. For a moment, the two stared at each other, both trying to suss each other out with their eyes, and Zingai realized that the old woman would not break, and he had to state his case now. "I came to take my father's crest, the one you wear on your throat," he said. The old dealer Makoni, co-founder of the Healer's Grove, looked at him for a second longer than was necessary, as though trying to frighten him. Then her eyes rolled languidly towards Yemurai, and she said slowly, in a sing-song voice, "Excuse us." But Zingai's hand was faster, and he grabbed Yamurai's wrist, gripping it so tightly that she yelped. "Sorry," he said, looking at her apologetically, sincerely, before turning to Makoni and saying, "She stays, in case you finish me off like you finished my father, your only son, erasing him from the face of the earth. She stays and bears witness to your brutality, your cruelty, your desire as a mother hen to step over and obliterate your own eggs." You could see Makoni's face change as he spoke, from an expressionless, even challenging gaze to confusion, then bewilderment, then disbelief. "What do you mean, my only son?" she asked, and you could hear the cracks in her voice. "I do not have a child," she finished indignantly. "Oh," he said slowly, "is this what you tell yourself to feel better, that you left a newborn in the hands of another woman and fled? And that over the last 60 or so rains, you have never turned towards the home you abandoned to check on him? Huh?" He watched as Makoni's eyes flicked over to Yamurai before they returned to his face, and she said in an anguished voice, "He passed away." Zingai laughed. "You have excuses for days, do you not? Now tell me, if he passed away, did you bury him?" For a long time, Makoni stared at him with her ruby eyes, and he watched the distress in her eyes. Then she spoke and said, "I indeed did give birth 62 rains ago, a love child that my lover and I did not know we had conceived, because I had taken all steps against his conception, healer that I am. But still, I fell pregnant, and they hid the pregnancy by locking me in the royal courtyard. I got so sick during childbirth, and when I came to, I had already given birth, but they told me that the baby had passed, and as was custom, I as the mother would not see the baby, lest my body would be cursed, and they had buried the baby. You know too that the mother should not see the grave because..." But Zingai was already laughing, and he had to stop himself as the wound in his side seared from the unexpected move. "Spare yourself the trouble and the very elaborate tale," he told the old woman. "Now, let's not waste each other's time. I am not here for a reunion, so you don't have to feel guilty. I am here for the crest." He gestured at the chain that dangled at your throat. "As you know, you had a child with a king-to-be, but unfortunately, my father could not prove he was king, because you had the other part of the crest here with you. When he came to reclaim it from you 5 reigns ago, you did what you have done best, destroy your very own eggs that you yourself bore, and you sent him back home lifeless, his body ready for burial. Now, I don't mean to cause you any trouble. Please, may I have the crest on your neck, and please allow me to return to my land." But the older woman kept staring at him and mumbling over and over again, "I have no son. I have no child. He passed away before I even held him. This is an impostor looking to profit from me. So now..." She stood up and called out, "Leave this hut, leave this grove. You have enjoyed our hospitality and our care for too long. Now you want to take advantage of it? Never. Leave." Zingai laughed mirthlessly. I was foolish to expect some remorse, some understanding from you, a woman who not only abandoned their child, but also when he did visit, decided to finish him off. It is true that you are indeed a witch, a heartless witch, and that is why they chased you from your home, and you do not know where your parents are buried. Zingai pushed his body up, and the body quickly protested in agony, and he promptly sat down and finished off his threat. I will go back to zero. I will become king without that crest, and one day I will come back and raise this witch's grove to the ground and reclaim my father's crest and his dignity and his name. This time he was determined to stand and walk away in spite of his pain, and he pressed his palm to the ground, scrunched his face in anticipatory pain, and began to push himself up. But just at that moment, there was a violent knock on the door to the old woman's heart, and Pepukai's gruff voice filtered, strong, violent, and agent, into the heart. Old woman, we have it on good authority that the fugitive we are looking for is hiding here in your hut. Open the door now, or else the peace treaty that Zero signed with the Healer's Grove will be revoked, and I and my army that is waiting just outside the grove will burn this witch's compound to the ground in an instant. Open up! Time froze as the three pairs of eyes turned to look at one another, and as the violent knock pounded the door again. To be continued. Thank you guys for watching and for coming all the way to the end. I appreciate you being here. This story is part of a series of stories set in a pre-colonial African hospital, and it explores the intrigue and mystery surrounding the hospital and its characters. Please do tune in next week, same time, for the next installment. Also, do not forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share with other peeps. Lots of love. Bye.